haunting in the old world. This is a story I always tell people when asked if I ever had a paranormal experience. I will tell you the first part about how it started with my mom. First, I need to clarify, my mom is sensitive. She does not see or hear spirits. It is more of a feeling thing. She always knows when something is about to happen, or something's wrong. Since she was raised Catholic, the priests and nuns always told her there was no such thing as ghosts, and she was just imagining things. In the late 1970s, she was living in Milan, Italy, with my dad in a house that was built around 1700 and was used as a shelter for the wounded during both world wars. Well, that has to be enough of an explanation for everything that happened there. It all started with feelings of being watched. She was never alone in a room. Even when she was alone in a room, she would feel touched, an overflow of thoughts in her mind that didn't seem like her own. After a while, my dad started showing signs of depression. He would stay home, catatonic, instead of showing up at work. He would be desperate, feeling empty and lost, although he was living what was supposed to be a happy life with the woman he loved. After my dad started getting unusually irritated and withdrawn, my mom took shelter in prayer. She would stay home and pray, trying to restore peace. That is when it started escalating. Every night, their shoes would be moved from where they were left. Shoelaces would be nowhere to be found, and would turn up the most unlikely places. They were even found hanging from a chandelier once. The house had a shower, which is an unusual addition in very old Italian buildings. It was old and rusty, so they needed to use a wrench every time they wanted to shower. The spirits of the house, however, didn't need any help and would start the water every night. My mom would wake up, scared to death but praying silently, while walking to the bathroom with her tools to stop the heavy flow of water. When she started getting used to it, the spirits turned it up a notch. My parents had a red chase sofa in their living room that came with the house. When mom would walk to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, there would be long strands of white hair all over the red cushions. She would clean it up daily, and most certainly they would be back every morning. I have to add, my dad is bald and my mom has black hair. By then, Dad would hardly leave the house and much less talk, not to mention he still denies and changes the subjects when we imply anything different was taking place in the house. After a few weeks, Mom had enough. She confronted the spirits by saying they would stop harming my father and her, and that either they would leave the house for good, or she would make them leave. That same morning, my mom was in a car accident. Her boss was driving, and she suddenly lost control and hit a parked truck. Although all the other people in the car left the scene without a scratch, my mom's legs were shattered in several places, and she needed immediate surgery. But the hospital my father worked in was unable to provide her with proper care. He then made arrangements for surgery back in Brazil, where he used to work, and they flew back home the same night. Since the confrontation, my mom has never again been able to step foot in that house. Phone call from another world? A friend of mine was on the phone with his girlfriend from Hong Kong, and she was telling him how she received a phone call from a friend of her father looking for her father earlier in the afternoon. Her dad was not home at that time, so she quickly took the number down on the caller display and let him know that her father will return the call when he returns. It slipped her mind until she was sitting at the dinner table with her parents, and she realized that she had forgotten to let her father know that his friend was looking for him. When she told him the name and phone number, Both her parents looked at each other with a strange look on their faces. Her father asked her if she was certain that this person called and left this number. She asked why, and her mother said because this friend of your father had passed away half a year ago, and this phone number should have been disconnected already. However, her father insisted on calling the number to find out who it was really, and of course, the phone was disconnected. None of them spoke a word of it after the call, and she proceeded to call my dorm mate in Canada, retelling him what just happened. I was in his room when this event took place. My buddy thought she was just playing a practical joke on him, so he just laughed it off and said, "Oh, really? The ghost friend of your father must be bored down there. That's why he called it." And as soon as he said it, we heard a big bang on his wall, and static over the phone with a deep voice asked, "Who are you?" My friend asked his girlfriend if she heard it, and she said she didn't hear anything because the phone got cut out for a second. They quickly ended their conversation, and I went to bed after because I didn't want to get involved with bad spirits. My friend got sick the next day, and we never brought it up ever again. A phone call from a dead friend. On October 15th, 3 years ago, I and 2 friends drove to Boise, Idaho, so that I could have open heart surgery. I needed to have 4 bypasses done as my arteries were 90% clogged. When we arrived in Boise, we had to find a motel room to stay in overnight, as I had to be at the hospital at 6 a.m. the next morning. My mom and brother were also going to be there, but they would arrive a couple of hours later. So we found a motel and checked in. We went to the room and took in our things for the night. We were sitting in the room for about 20 minutes when the phone rang and my care provider answered it. She got a funny look on her face and she said the phone was for me. No one knew where we were staying as I had not contacted anyone to let them know where we were staying. I took the phone and a Spanish-sounding voice on the other end asked if this was me. I said yes, and he said, "Don't have your surgery tomorrow. It's not your turn to die." I was floored. No one knew I was to have my surgery, and I had been contacted still. I asked, "Who is this?" And he said, "It's Oscar." The only person I knew by that name had died the year before, of cancer. I had worked with him at the factory and he would stop every shift and talk to me. In the background, I could hear hundreds of voices, and I asked him where he was at this particular place, and he said, "I am in between heaven and earth." Then he told me again not to have my surgery, as it was not my turn to die, and the connection went dead. I could hardly believe that this had happened, and I told my friend about the phone call. I called my brother and told him about the phone call. They were still about an hour away from Boise. He knew this friend as he worked at the same factory as we did. He told me that I better take the call seriously and they would see us in a little while and we would go eat. We discussed the phone call over dinner, and my mother and brother both agreed that I had better talk to my doctor about it, at least about my concern. The next morning, we went to the hospital just before 6 a.m. and they started getting me ready. I asked to see my doctor and they told me he would be there in just a few minutes. I looked through the door a few minutes later and he was pacing back and forth in tight circles in front of my door. Then he came in, and before I could tell him what had happened, he said that my surgery had been postponed for a week and that the head doctor of the department would be there to see me in a few minutes. When the other doctor came in, he told me that the doctor was scheduled to do the surgery and had lost the last 3 patients he had, and they were all from my area. He had rescheduled my surgery for 1 week later and that he would be doing the surgery. 1 week later, I had the surgery and went through with it without any problems. I thank God that He allows our friends to warn us when it's not our time to die. I also thank God for giving me a second chance and for giving us friends that care so much to change the future.